I'd like to describe a little bit more about what I'm going to try and do with this. Hi there, and welcome to Brandbait Podcast, our very first podcast. Well, my first podcast anyway. So, today, I'd like to describe a little bit more about what I'm going to try and do with this podcast. So, my vision for this podcast is to bring leadership stories and management stories that you probably heard of, but you haven't probably heard all of it in your time. So, and even if you're new to it, we can sort of discover it together, basically. So today, who do I want to talk about? I want to talk about Henry Ford. Why do I want to talk about Henry Ford? Henry Ford, to me, is really basically, he's the father of manufacturing, really. And if it sounds like I'm actually looking for stuff, it is. Because basically I have done some research on it and have wrote some notes, and we'll be going on this journey of discovery together. So it's hard to remember absolutely everything about this man's life, so you're going to have to bear with me a little bit here. Right, so Henry Ford. Henry Ford was born July 30th, 1863. Was an American industrialist and business magnate. This is off his Wikipedia page, by the way. So he's the founder of the Ford Motor Company. He's chief developer of the assembly line technique and mass production. So I'm not really too interested in his previous, early lives. I'm more interested in him as a grown-up. So him as a grown man, he's just starting the Ford Motor Company. He's trying to get it off the ground, and how he did so and how he made it such a massive success. I mean, you can't even compare some of the companies that are now big business compared to what Ford did. And he changed the entire area, in my opinion. He just created manufacturing. So mass production is basically known as a flow of production or continuous production. It is production of sustainable amounts of standardized product and a constant flow, especially assembly lines. Now, Ford were the first, I believe, you can correct me if I want, the first motor company that had an assembly line. But not only that, he paid his workers more than anyone else, because he didn't need them to have specialist skills. He just needed them to get into it and just do it. So let's have a little look at what did I write down here. Yeah, so the Ford Motor Company, he started the Ford Motor Company on June 16th, 1903, with $28,000 in capital, which I can only doubt is a great deal in those days. About in 1903, yeah, so it's pre-World War One, I think, unless that's completely stupid and I've got my dates wrong here. So we started off with the Model T, debuted in October the 1st, 1908, so it took him a couple of years to get that going. The entire engine and transmission was enclosed, the 4 cylinders, the cast stock block, suspension used in a semi-elliptical spring. I think that's leaf springs. So the car was cheap to repair. It was also cheap to buy, $825, which is about $23,700 today. So it wasn't really that cheap. You still had to be quite wealthy to get hold of one of these things. So let's have a look. So he sold his, when was it released? So he sold the 1908, October 1908, the first, and by 1914, so 6 years later, they passed 250,000 sales. That's absolutely amazing. For a brand new product, and bearing in mind people were still running around in horses and carts. Final production run was 15,007,034 units. 45 years that stood for. And it was in production for 19 years. Absolutely amazing. Sorry if you're expecting like a really in-depth look into Henry Ford and his life, but bear in mind this is my very first podcast, so I am going to be absolutely all over the place, and I want it to be a little bit of me as well. Because not only do I know a little bit about Henry Ford, I've actually listened to several different kind of interviews and stories of his life, but I don't want to just reiterate what they've told you. I want to do my little intake on it as well, so you're going to have to bear with me here as I'm going through pages of notes that I've wrote, which are not in any different kind of order. They don't even match. Right, so here's something that's interesting. The labour philosophy. So, the $5 wage. Ford was a pioneer of welfare capitalism, designed to improve the lot of his workers and especially to reduce the heavy turnover that many departments hiring 300 men per year to fill 100 slots. Ford astonished the world in 1914 by offering a $5 per day wage, that's $130 today, that's still quite good even these days, which more than doubled the rate of most workers. A Cleveland, Ohio newspaper editorialized and announced like a blinding rocket in the dark cloud of present industry depression. So he announced the $5 per day program on January the 5th, 1914, rising to a minimum daily pay from £2.34 to $5 for qualifying male workers. Not even getting into that kind of debate. We've come a long way though, so let's not look too far back. So Detroit was already a high-wage city and raised wages for the best workers, which makes sense. We do that over here, especially in the UK. In London, you get paid more, even if you do the same as something elsewhere. The social department used 50 investors to support staff and maintain employee standards. A large percentage of workers were able to qualify for the profit-sharing scheme. So this is where you first really start seeing, not only did he bring a pay rise and these sort of manufacturing things, but he actually started to care about his employees. He actually brought people in to make sure standards were in and maintained, and also in profit sharing schemes, which is great for encouraging your workers to actually care and wanting the company to do well, because then they get paid twice. It's a no-brainer, really. Ford's incursion into his employees' private lives was highly controversial, and he soon backed off from the most intrusive aspects. Okay, so he sounds like a bit of a douche at the beginning, but he's finally figured it out. He spoke to the social department and private conditions of profit sharing in the past tense. He admitted that the paternalism, hopefully that's right, has no place in industry. Welfare work that consists of prying into employees' private concerns is out of date. Men need counsel and men need help, often special help, and these ought to be rendered in the decency's sake. But the broad workable plan of an investment and participation will do more to solidify the industry and strengthen the organisation and will any social work on the outside. Without changing the principle, we have changed the method of payment. Oh, that's good. Sorry, I can't actually see very well here, so turn my light on. I apologise if the sound's going everywhere, but I'm trying to hold the mic here. It's a brand new mic. I haven't had it long. So in addition to rising his workers' wages, Ford also introduced a reduced work week. Okay, 1926, the decision was made in 1922 when the Ford described 6 to 8 hour days, giving a 48-hour week. But in 1926, it was announced that 5 8-hour days, giving a 40-hour week. The program apparently started with Saturday being designated as a work day before becoming a day off sometime later. So on May the 1st, 1926, the Ford Company's factory workers switched to a 5-day week and a 40-hour work week, with the company's office workers making the transition in the following August. It's absolutely amazing. So in 1926, this man went from, so 6 8-hour days. So you only had Sunday off, probably for going to church, to be honest, but you had to work 6 8-hour days, giving you a 48-hour week. So he reduced it to 5, giving his employees an extra day to spend with their families. Ford had decided to boost productivity as workers were expected to put more effort into their work in exchange for more leisure time. Ford also believes that decent leisure time was good for business, giving workers additional time to purchase and consume more goods. However, charitable concerns also played a role. For Ford example, it is high time to rid ourselves of the notion that leisure for workmen is either lost time or class privilege. So again we're seeing, like, especially in certain industries, that the 5-day work week is just not a thing anymore. So we're almost going backwards. I mean, look at this man in 1926, for all his faults, I'm not saying that he was perfect. He did have some problems in his life, I have no doubt. But he had the forward thinking. I know, like, me personally, I'm trying to build my own business here, so it's going to be more. But he understood the fact that people need time off. You can't just expect your workers to work all the hours of the day. And he figured that out in 1922, nearly 100 years ago. It's amazing, really. So you read about all these things about, the 7-day work week is in, you want to have access to absolutely everything in one go. And I still believe that, there's a good proportion of companies out there. Like, I know people who work shift patterns where they work 4 days on and 4 days off. I know people who work weird shift patterns, like continental shift patterns, or they work 3 days on, have 4 days off, then work 3 days on, then have 5 days off. It's all these different kind of elaborations of it. But you can see consistently throughout history, our modern future is because of these people back in the past who had the foresight to see how the world was going to be. I mean, I suppose you can look at it like now, like Elon Musk and Amazon. Not Amazon, Jeff Bezos. Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. They're setting the standards for the future. All right, they work a damn sight more than 40 hours a week, I bet. But anyway, Amazon. Amazon's just like a glorified logistics company, isn't it, really? I mean, they may hold the stuff and warehouse it, but they do manufacture some products, I suppose. So that's been a bit unfair. Anyway, let's get back to the topic. So, what am I looking at? So, what did he do for his people? So, again, this is a different kind of thing. It's like, I've got some notes here about the Ford Aeroplane Company. I had no idea they made airplanes. He started off making cars. And then, what looks like when World War One started. So, like other automobile companies, Ford entered the aviation business during World War One, building the Liberty engines. After the war, it returned to auto manufacturing in 1925, where Ford acquired the Stout Metal Aeroplane Company. Stout Metal Aeroplane. Ford's most successful aircraft was the Ford 480 Trimotor, often called the Tin Goose. Tin Goose. Just Google it. You should see this thing. It looks like a death trap, but I bet that was state of the art back in the day. Absolutely state of the art, probably. So the Ford's engine superbly measured the Fokker plane and it copied it. The Trimotor first flew on June 11th, 1926 and was the first successful US passenger airline accommodating about 12 passengers in rather uncomfortable fashion. Several variants were also used by the US Army, the Smithsonian Institute, and honoured Ford in changing the aviation industry. 199 of them were built before discontinuing in 1933. The Ford Aeroplane division shut down because of poor sales during the Great Depression, which isn't that surprising, really. So, Ford had opposed the United States entering World War II, continued to believe that international business could generate the prosperity that would head off wars. Ford insisted that the war was a product of greedy French financiers who sought profit in human destruction. In 1939, he went on so far to claim that the torpedoing of US merchant ships by German submarines was the result of a conspiratorial activities undertaken by financial war makers. The financiers of whom were referring to Ford's Code for Jews. Well, this isn't great. We're learning something here. Also accused Jews of fomenting the First World War. In the run-up to World War II, as a war erupted in 1939. If you think I'm being racist here towards Jews, I'm not. I'm just reading the notes that I've wrote down and also cross-checking it with Wikipedia. Well, which could be wrong. I'm not saying that. So these are Henry Ford's words, not mine. So, like many other businesses in the Great Depression era, it is entirely trusted on Franklin Roosevelt's administration, very similar to what we're doing now here in the UK, actually. Since the coronavirus, we're all held hostage to whatever Boris Johnson wants us to say. Although I do think he has done quite a good job, actually. Sorry, I'm just taking a drink here because I'm a bit dry. Beginning in 1940, with the requisition of 120 French POWs to work as slave labourers. Oh my God. Ford work contravened Article 31 of the 1929 Geneva Convention. At the time, which was before the US entered the war and still had diplomatic relations with Nazi Germany, Ford Werk, well, it'd probably be answered with a V. So Ford Werk was under the control of the Ford Motor Company. A number of slave labour crews as the war expanded, even though Nazi authorities did not require German companies to use the slave labour. Oh God, here we go, now we're getting into something British. When Rolls-Royce sought a US manufacturer as an additional source for the Merlin engine, as fitted in Spitfires and Hurricanes, Ford agreed to do so, and then regenerated the lineup before the war effort in 1941. His support of the American war effort, however, was problematic. So this is Henry Ford here, not the Ford Motor Company by the looks of it. So before the US entered the war, responding to President Roosevelt's call in December 1940, Ford directed the Ford Motor Company to construct a vast new purpose-built aircraft factory called Willow Run near Detroit, Michigan. Ford broke ground on Willow Run in the spring of 1941. The B-24 component production began in May 1942. And the first completed B-24 came off the production line in October. So what's that? May, June, July, August, September, October. So that's 5 months it took him to build this plane. Which is, again, the guy makes cars, so you can't really. So, using his assembly line method, peaked in 1944, the Willow Run plant produced 650 B-24 bombers. I think they're bombers. B-24s per month. So again, he's using the same manufacturing. This is what modern business needs to learn. Just because you're creating something different doesn't mean that the old ways are dead. They still work. I mean, this guy used to build cars. Well, has been building cars, and now all of a sudden he's building planes. Anyway, let's get back to it. Ford produced 9,000 B-24s, half of the 18,000 B-24s produced during the war. Died of cancer in 1914. Okay, so when Edsel Ford died of cancer in 1943, aged only 49, Henry Ford nominally resumed control of the company. But in a series of strokes in the late 30s that left him increasingly debilitated, and his mental ability was fading. Ford was increasingly sidelined to other made decisions in his name. The company was controlled by a handful of senior executives, led by Charles Sawson, an important engineer and production executive at Ford. The chief of Ford's service unit, Ford's paramilitary force, and spied on and enforced discipline upon Ford employees. Ford grew jealous of the publicity Soren received and forced Soren out in 1944. Ford's incompetence. I have to apologise, right? Because if you're listening to this and you're expecting this highly educated person to be delivering this, I like dealing with people and managing people, but I also like learning, and I like learning about the different kinds of people who have led and managed throughout the world. So I'm learning along with you because I only have a certain amount of time after my job to sort this stuff out. So that's done. I'm sorry, Sorkin, for me talking around. So, Ford's incompetence led to discussions in Washington about how to restore the company, whether by wartime government fiat or by instigating a coup among executives and directors. Nothing happened until 1945 when, with bankruptcy a serious risk, Ford's wife Clara and Edsall's widow Eleanor confronted him and demanded he cede control of the company to his grandson, Henry Ford II. They threatened to sell their stock, which amounted to 3/4 of the company's total shares, if he refused. Ford was reportedly infuriated but had no choice but to give in. The young man took over and his first act of business fired Harry Bennett. Who's Harry Bennett? I haven't come across anyone named Harry Bennett. Sorry, because I've got my notes and I've also got Wikipedia up because I don't want to tell you wrong information or let me think that the information I've currently got is not correct. I'm trying to be as, professional as possible here, if you can believe it. So, right, so that's basically a short little podcast total thing about the life of Henry Ford. Well, especially the Ford Motor Company with him in charge anyway. So he died on April 7th, 1947, so he didn't live much into his retirement. So let's have a little look at what he did about the assembly lines. So, concepts. Craftsman Division of Labour. Okay, so according to Henry Ford, the principles of an assembly line are: place the tools and the men in sequence of the operation so that each component part shall travel at least possible distance while in the process of finishing. Use work slides or some other form of carrier so that when workmen complete his operation, he drops the part always in the same place, which place must always be the most convenient place to his hand, and if possible, have gravity carry it part of the next way. Use sliding assembly lines by which the parts can be assembled and delivering at convenient distances and speed. So designing assembly lines is a well-established mathematical challenge referred to as an assembly line balancing program. In this simple assembly line balancing problem, the aim is to assign a set of tasks that need to be performed on a workpiece to a sequence of workstations. Each task requires a given task duration for completion. The assignment of tasks to stations is typically limited to two constraints: a precedence graph which indicates what other tasks need to be completed before a particular task can be initiated, e.g. not putting in a screw before drilling the hole. And the second cycle of times restriction is the sum of task processing times which can be completed at each workstation. before the workpieces moved to the next station on the conveyor belt. Major planning problems operated the assembly line, especially ones in Detroit, as Ford started this process. It's absolutely amazing, really. I'm still, you see, as you can probably tell, I'm fascinated by this man. I know he wasn't perfect in any way, but his idea for business, I know it seemed to go a little bit downhill towards the end, but his pioneering of a system that launched mass production and made cars affordable when people were still, using horses and carriage. They weren't really that keen on using cars. So he designed a product that the world wasn't ready for, and he made the world ready for it. So he gave the people enough so they can afford to live and work, but he also paid them enough so they can buy his cars. So technically, he was getting his money back. So, is there anything else you'd like to learn about? Because basically, I'm interested in just the Ford Motor Company, how they operated, and Henry Ford himself, because the man. So he's an engineer, industrialist, and a philanthropist. So again, what was his early life like? Did he ever work anywhere else? In 1891, Ford became an engineer at Edison Illumination Company, didn't know that. So he worked for Thomas Edison. After his promotion to chief engineer in 1893, he had enough time and money to devote his attention to experiments with gasoline engines. Those experiments culminated in 1896 with the completion of a self-propelled vehicle which he named the Ford Quadricycle. He test drove it on June 4th. After various test drives, Ford brainstormed ways to improve the quadricycle. Also in 1896, Ford attended a meeting of Edison's executives where he was introduced to Thomas Edison. Edison approved of Ford's automobile experimentation. Encouraged by Edison, Ford designed and built a second vehicle, completing it in 1898. Backed by capital of the Detroit lumber baron W. H. Murphy, Ford resigned from the Edison Company and founded the Detroit Automobile Company on August 5th, 1899. So it seems like as soon as he had that one inspiration in 1896, he knew then that this is what he wanted to do. And he was, 1896, so he was 25 in 88, so he's 30, he's in his 30s. So it didn't come to him quickly. However, the automobiles produced were of lower quality and higher price than Ford wanted. Ultimately, the company was not successful and dissolved in 1901. With the help of C. Harold Willis, Ford designed and built a a 26 horsepower automobile in October 1901 and was successful. Murphy and other stockholders in the Detroit Automobile Company formed the Henry Ford Company, on November 30th, 1901, with Ford as chief engineer. In 1902, Murphy brought in Henry M. Leland as a consultant. Ford, in response, left the company, bearing his own name. With Ford gone, Leyland, not Leland, renamed the company the Cadillac Automobile Company. So, the Cadillac Automobile Company was also started and helped by Ford. Teaming up with former racing cyclist Tom Cooper, Ford also produced an 80 horsepower racer, 999 it was called, which Barry Oldfield was to drive to victory in the race of 1892. Ford received and backed an old acquaintance, Alexander Malcolmson, a Detroit area coal dealer. They formed a partnership, Ford and Malcolmson Limited, to manufacture automobiles. Ford went to work designing an inexpensive automobile and leased the factory and contracted with the machine shop owned by John and Horace E. Dodge to supply over $160,000 in parts. Sales were slow, and the crisis was when Dodge Brothers demanded payment for their first shipment. So here we go. We're back onto the Ford Motors Company was started with $28,000 in capital. Later career. Well, you only have to look at what the Ford's still doing. You know, the Model A was the Ford Model T was the car of, forever back in the 20s. And even in the 30s and 40s, I dare say. Now you got the F-150 in America. There's, if you believe everything that you read, one's sold like every minute or something, and you could... So put end to end, it would go round the world and to the moon and back, or wherever it was. Ford was also widely known for its basically for his objection for the first years of World War I and promoting anti-Semitic content. Oh God. And The International Jew, a book. Well, I'm not getting into politics. That's not what I'm here for. So hopefully you can get some kind of, from my ramblings, some kind of idea of who he was, what he did. I, for one, didn't know he created manufacturing, or at least mass manufacturing, until I started doing some research on him. And that's when I started hearing about it, and I started to dig a little bit more. And I just needed to find out a bit more, because you think of even like the 5-day work week and the 40-hour work week, which is something that's so standard nowadays. He invented that, sort of. He brought the idea up, I suppose. I wonder how much he actually ever earned. Become an engineer. Where am I going with this? I've no idea. I've lost where I'm supposed to be going with this. Anyway, yeah, so this podcast is supposed to be about my interests and hopefully bringing something interesting to you. My company is a leadership coaching service that drives to inspire real change within modern business and services. I can't speak or help Henry Ford and his motor company, because by the looks of it, they don't need my help anyway. They seem to be doing fine without me. You never know though, I might be able to help them. Seem to be all over the world though, to be brutally honest. So yeah, I'm not even going to touch on that one. Yeah, so like I said, hopefully I've brought you something a little bit different. This will be the style that I bring these kind of podcasts in. I'm going to try and release one once a week, so these will come out every Friday. And I just want to bring you fascinating people that, although don't get too bought up and stuck up about who these individuals were, I'm trying to illustrate what good things they did and how they shaped the world we currently live in. I mean, I bet he had no idea that the 5-day working week and the 40-hour work week was going to go to every single industry, let alone his manufacturing basically ethos to go all over the world. It's just outstanding, really. Well, anyway, it just shows the vision of the man, really. So hopefully this has brought you a little bit more information about Henry Ford that you didn't know before. If you do find these podcasts at all interesting, please comment, like and subscribe. If you don't find them interesting, please comment. I want to get better. This isn't going to be a just a one-off thing for me, so I'm going to try and get better at these. So yeah, so just stay safe, don't do anything stupid, and I'll catch you next time.